The American Civil War is usually remembered through generals, presidents, and armies of men, but hidden inside the conflict were women who carried rifles, crossed enemy lines, stole military secrets, survived capture, and helped shape major operations. Some fought disguised as men, others turned social connections and coded intelligence into weapons, and a few became dangerous enough to be imprisoned or sentenced to death. These are the 20 deadliest women of the Civil War era, and some of their stories sound impossible. Starting at number 20 is Frances Day, one of the Civil War's most mysterious female soldiers. Historical accounts connect her with service under the name Frank Maine, including time with Pennsylvania troops. Women were barred from ordinary combat service, but some still disguised themselves and enlisted as men. Day's story survives only in fragments, but later accounts indicate that she continued serving in another regiment and was eventually mortally wounded in battle. She left behind no dramatic memoir explaining why she chose to fight. Somewhere under that uniform was a woman knowingly marching into rifle fire, artillery, disease, and death. Her incomplete record leaves a haunting question. How many others fought and died without their real identities being recorded? At number 19 is Annie Etheridge, a woman who repeatedly walked directly into gunfire to save wounded soldiers. Etheridge served with Michigan regiments as a battlefield nurse and daughter of the regiment. She did not remain safely behind hospital tents. When soldiers fell during combat, Annie moved among them while bullets and shells were still flying, carrying water, providing first aid, and helping wounded men escape. Entering that chaos voluntarily required extraordinary courage. Annie became known for refusing to abandon men who needed help. She may not have killed enemy soldiers herself, but every Union soldier she saved was one less man lost to the battlefield. At number 18, Cady Brownell. Cady Brownell did something even experienced soldiers feared. She carried a regiment's colors into battle. Regimental flags guided soldiers through smoke and confusion, making color-bearers obvious targets. Brownell accompanied her husband into military service and became associated with Rhode Island troops. At the First Battle of Bull Run in 1861, she carried the colors while Union formations collapsed around her. Accounts describe her remaining exposed as soldiers retreated through artillery and rifle fire. She later assisted wounded soldiers with the regiment. Brownell did not need a male disguise to enter danger. She stood openly on a battlefield carrying one of the most visible targets imaginable and survived. At number 17 is Elizabeth Compton, whose reported military career reads like an adventure story. Historical accounts describe her entering Union service while still extremely young and moving between different regiments whenever she feared her identity was about to be discovered. She reportedly spent around 18 months in military service before being exposed after suffering a wound. Maintaining that disguise meant marching, sleeping beside soldiers, surviving inspections, and behaving convincingly enough to avoid discovery. When suspicion grew, she reportedly enlisted elsewhere. Because such women appeared in records under male names, historians may never know exactly how many fought. At number 16, Sarah Rosetta Wakeman. Sarah Rosetta Wakeman left behind something especially valuable: letters written during her service. Using the name Lyons Wakeman, she enlisted in the 153rd New York Infantry and served as an ordinary Union soldier. She took part in the dangerous Red River Campaign in Louisiana, facing combat, exhaustion, heat, and disease. Her letters reveal confidence in military life and pride in earning her own pay. Remarkably, the Army never discovered her identity. She became seriously ill, died in 1864, and was buried under her military name, living and dying in the Army's eyes as a soldier. If you enjoy forgotten stories like these, subscribe, because some incredible people barely appear in traditional history books, and from here, the women become even more dangerous. At number 15, Frances Hook. Frances Hook was still a teenager when the Civil War began, yet accounts connect her with service in several Union regiments under male identities, including Frank Martin. During her military career, she was reportedly wounded, captured by Confederate troops, and eventually discovered to be female. Her captors suspected she might be a spy. After imprisonment and exchange, reports suggest Hook tried to return to military service. Some details vary across later accounts, but she clearly belonged to the women who repeatedly chose military danger over safety. At number 14, Frances Clayton. Frances Clayton became one of the most famous photographed female soldiers of the Civil War. Often identified in accounts by the male name Jack Williams, Clayton reportedly entered military service alongside her husband. Contemporary stories described her as convincing enough to march, curse, smoke, and handle a firearm like the men around her. Her worst experience came at the bloody Battle of Stones River. Her husband was killed during the fighting, but Clayton reportedly continued serving. She was wounded, and her identity eventually became known. Newspapers later sensationalized her story, but Clayton was associated with frontline service in a battle where thousands were killed or wounded. At number 13 is Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, one of the few female physicians in America at the time. Walker wanted to serve the Union Army but faced resistance because she was a woman. She eventually worked as a surgeon near the front, treating soldiers and civilians. Crossing military lines to provide care also made Confederates suspect she was gathering intelligence. In 1864, Confederate forces captured her and imprisoned her for several months before she was exchanged. Walker later received the Medal of Honor, becoming the only woman in American history to receive the award. She repeatedly entered contested territory where suspicion of espionage could be fatal, yet imprisonment never ended her determination to serve. At number 12, Loretta Janetta Velasquez. Few stories are as controversial as that of Loretta Janetta Velasquez. After the war, she published a sensational memoir claiming that she disguised herself as a Confederate officer named Harry T. Buford, recruited soldiers, fought in major battles, and later worked as a spy. The story made her legendary, but historians have challenged major portions of it, and several battlefield claims cannot be confirmed. Velasquez clearly lived an unusual life connected to the Confederacy, but her memoir must be handled cautiously. Her story shows how secret wartime service can become difficult to separate from exaggeration and legend. At number 11, Lola Sanchez. Maria Dolores Lola. Sanchez became one of Florida's most important Confederate spies. After Union troops arrested her father, she began gathering information from Federal soldiers. Union officers reportedly discussed plans inside the Sanchez home without realizing Lola was listening. She learned of an upcoming raid and warned Confederate Captain John Jackson Dickerson, whose men prepared an ambush. In May 1864, Dickerson's forces attacked near the St. Johns River and captured the Union gunboat USS Columbine after a fierce engagement. Lola did not fire the guns herself, but her intelligence told Confederate soldiers where and when to strike. One overheard conversation became a weapon. At number 10, Antonia Ford. Antonia Ford turned ordinary social conversation into military intelligence. Living in Fairfax Courthouse, Virginia, she interacted with Union officers and allegedly gathered details about troop movements and military activity for Confederate commanders. J.E.B. Stuart even gave her an honorary commission as an aide-de-camp, a document that later became damaging evidence. Ford was also suspected of helping Confederate partisan leader John S. Mosby, whose raiders famously entered Union-occupied Fairfax and captured Brigadier General Edwin Stoughton, along with prisoners and horses. Historians debate Ford's exact role, but Union authorities considered her dangerous enough to arrest and imprison. Careless words around the wrong person could compromise an entire command. Ford's case showed exactly why military officers feared civilian intelligence networks operating behind occupied lines. At number 9 is Betty Duval, whose famous mission involved hiding intelligence in one of the simplest places imaginable, her hair. Duval became connected with Confederate spy Rose O'Neal Greenhow, who had obtained valuable information about Union plans before the First Battle of Manassas. Greenhow needed a courier. Duval reportedly disguised herself as a farm woman, hid a coded message in her hair, and crossed dangerous territory toward Confederate lines. Had Union soldiers searched her and discovered secret military information, she could have faced imprisonment as a spy. Instead, she successfully carried Washington's secrets toward Confederate headquarters. Her mission was brief, but without a reliable courier, even the best intelligence was useless. At number 8, Sarah Emma Edmonds. Sarah Emma Edmonds lived one of the most extraordinary double lives of the war. Before joining the army, she had already been living as a man under the name Franklin Thompson. When war began, Thompson enlisted in the 2nd Michigan Infantry. Edmonds served as a nurse, mail carrier, and soldier, and experienced active campaigning with Union forces. She later claimed multiple espionage missions using elaborate disguises, though historians question how many actually occurred. What is documented is remarkable enough. She successfully enlisted under a male identity, remained in military service for roughly 2 years, and later received official recognition and a pension for her service. Even without every spy tale, her documented military career was extraordinary. At number 7, Mary Tuvestre. Mary Tuvestre's weapon was information about one of the most terrifying machines of the Civil War. Confederate workers were transforming the former USS Merrimack into the ironclad CSS Virginia, capable of destroying wooden Union ships. Tuvestre obtained information about the project and carried it north. Navy Secretary Gideon Welles later acknowledged its value. In March 1862, the Virginia devastated Union ships before meeting the USS Monitor in the famous Battle of Hampton Roads. Tuvestre never fired a cannon, but she carried knowledge about a weapon threatening an entire fleet and crossed hostile territory to deliver it. In a naval war, information about a new ironclad could be as important as ammunition. At number 6, Mary Jane Richards. For many years, popular history told the story of a Union spy named Mary Elizabeth Bowser working secretly inside Jefferson Davis's Confederate White House. Modern research has corrected much of that legend. The woman connected with Elizabeth Van Loo's Richmond intelligence network was Mary Jane Richards, an educated black woman who had once been enslaved by the Van Loo family. Some dramatic claims, including stealing documents directly from Jefferson Davis's desk while pretending to be illiterate, are not firmly supported. But Richards did participate in Union intelligence work in Richmond. As a black woman operating inside the Confederate capital, discovery could have brought terrifying consequences. Her real story needed no embellishment. She was helping undermine the Confederacy from the very heart of its government. At number 5, Elizabeth Van Loo. Elizabeth Van Loo built one of the Union's most effective intelligence networks from inside Richmond. Born into a wealthy Virginia family, she remained loyal to the Union while living in the Confederate capital. She gained access to Union prisoners at Libby Prison, bringing food and supplies while secretly helping prisoners communicate and assisting escape efforts. Her work grew into a spy network of black and white operatives, hidden messages, codes, and couriers. Her social position gave her useful cover, although neighbors increasingly hated her Union sympathies. By the final years of the war, her network was feeding valuable information from Richmond toward Union commanders. A rifle threatened one soldier. Van Loo's network could threaten entire operations. Her ability to keep information moving out of Richmond made her especially valuable as Union armies closed in. At number 4, Pauline Cushman. Pauline Cushman was an actress before the war, and acting became the skill that nearly got her executed. Working for the Union, Cushman posed as a Confederate sympathizer and traveled through enemy territory. In Tennessee, she obtained military information, including a map of Confederate positions. Confederate authorities captured her and discovered evidence of espionage. She was taken before General Braxton Bragg, tried as a spy, and sentenced to death by hanging. But the execution never happened. Cushman became ill while imprisoned, and advancing Union troops forced Confederate forces to withdraw before the sentence could be carried out. She later became famous as Major Pauline Cushman. Few women came closer to dying for their intelligence work. Had Union forces arrived later, her story might have ended at the gallows. At number 3, Belle Boyd. Belle Boyd became one of the Confederacy's most famous spies, and her dangerous reputation began with bloodshed. In 1861, during a confrontation at her family home in Martinsburg, Boyd shot and killed a Union soldier who had confronted or insulted her mother. She was not prosecuted for the killing. Soon afterward, she gathered information from Union soldiers and passed it to Confederate commanders. During Stonewall Jackson's Shenandoah Valley campaign, she carried information about Union positions and movements. Boyd was arrested multiple times, imprisoned, released, and later captured aboard a Confederate blockade runner. Behind the later celebrity was a woman who repeatedly placed herself inside dangerous intelligence operations. Arrest and imprisonment never seemed to end her willingness to take another risk. At number 2, Rose O'Neal Greenhow. Rose O'Neal Greenhow transformed Washington high society into a Confederate intelligence network. Her pre-war relationships with politicians, officers, and government figures became valuable intelligence sources. Greenhow obtained details about Union military plans before the First Battle of Manassas and passed warnings to Confederate leaders, helping them prepare for the Federal advance. Union detective Alan Pinkerton eventually placed her under surveillance, and she was arrested after evidence of her spy network was uncovered. Even confinement did not immediately stop her attempts to communicate. After being sent south, she traveled to Europe for the Confederacy. In 1864, returning aboard a blockade runner with gold and dispatches, Greenhow drowned after the vessel ran aground while evading Union forces. Even her final journey was tied directly to the Confederate cause she had served. And at number 1 is Harriet Tubman, whose Civil War career went far beyond the Underground Railroad. Tubman served the Union as a nurse, scout, recruiter, intelligence operative, and military guide in South Carolina. She organized black scouts and informants who knew local roads, rivers, plantations, and Confederate positions. That intelligence became crucial during the Combahee River Raid of June 1863. Tubman accompanied Union gunboats carrying black soldiers upriver into Confederate territory. Her knowledge helped the expedition navigate dangerous waterways and Confederate defenses. Union forces struck plantations, destroyed resources, and liberated more than 700 enslaved people, some of whom later joined the Union effort. Tubman became the first woman in American history widely recognized for leading an armed military expedition. The operation combined intelligence, navigation, liberation, and military force in a way no other woman on this list matched. She had spent years defeating slave catchers in secret. During the Civil War, she turned those same skills against the Confederacy itself. These 20 women proved the Civil War was not shaped only by famous male generals. Some carried rifles under male identities, some walked through gunfire to save soldiers, others hid coded messages, crossed hostile territory, or built intelligence networks capable of influencing military operations. Their loyalties were different, and the causes they supported were not morally equivalent. The Confederacy fought to preserve slavery, while Union victory ultimately destroyed legal slavery in the United States. But their stories reveal how much danger women accepted during a war that officially gave them almost no place in combat. Perhaps the most unbelievable part is how many more women may have served, spied, suffered, or died without their identities ever being recorded. If you enjoyed this countdown, hit like, subscribe, and tell us which woman surprised you most? Stay tuned, because the Civil War still holds stories stranger than fiction.